Reading the Gospel of Mark, I started to realize that, perhaps it is possible that the universe is created, and how do we find this out? And obviously, if you were God and decided to that you wanted to interact in some way, and we were the ants, and you don't just sort of yell at the ants, but one way you might do it is to become an ant, and obviously there are liabilities in that. There's ample opportunity for confusion. You can say, well, I'm God, and I can say, well, you're crazy. And so there is a reasonableness for Jesus to be God come to earth.
Okay.
And,
I appreciate your sharing that. Dr. Suppe, as you look back over 7 or 8 years of the tradition of inviting in a Christian scholar, a top mind in the Christian camp, to speak here on the Princeton campus, sponsored by you all, sponsored by the Christian faculty group. I think you've had Dr. Vitz, the psychologist from NYU, speak on atheism, a Christian perspective on that, and Dr. Thaxton on the origin of DNA, and Dr. Yamauchi on the resurrection. What would you say are some of your favorite highlights? In other words, what do you think? What do you feel was the worthwhileness of that project, or those lectures, and what were maybe some of your favorite moments in those series?
Well, it's interesting to talk to other people that went to these lectures. Different people respond in different ways. People are coming from different perspectives. But for me, it was actually Al Planiga, who's really, I would say, the leading Christian philosopher. And I actually got to meet him then, and I've had an ongoing relationship with him, and I think he's been a very personally stimulating person.
Did your brother, who's a professor, I believe, of philosophy of science?
That's right.
Was he influenced through Dr. Plania?
Well, they're good friends, and my brother actually did become a Christian at age 50, and was...
And he was a professor also?
Yeah,
at that point?
Yes, yes, and in fact, my brother organized a conference on epistemology of science and Christianity. That is, how do we know in science and how do we know in Christianity? And that was, Al Planiga was involved in that, and I actually gave a paper on that. And
Great.
It was a very exciting time a couple of years ago.
Well, I can recall the shock, my shock at seeing a packed audience to hear Dr. Yamauchi, this famous historian of the ancient Near East, give a talk at Princeton on the credibility, the historical credibility of the resurrection.
That's right. I enjoyed that talk very much.
Yeah, I could put a plug in here and say that we have copies of both the tape and the paper, but I won't plug that. Just did. Let me move on to 1 or 2 other questions.
Sure.
What books that you have read in your career as a Christian professor of geology here at Princeton, what books, it doesn't have to be on apologetics, but anything that has maybe encouraged you and helped you, given you some input and some impacted your own thinking here as a Christian on campus? Right.
I would say that the 2 things. First of all, particularly as a new Christian and on since then, I've read quite a few biographies of strong Christians, missionaries, people like that, particularly 20th century, 19th, 20th century, and that was a tremendous inspiration for me to see how God worked through these people, through their lives, and sometimes it wasn't until they were 70 years old that the Lord really had them in a position where He could really use them, and that was encouraging to me. And then I've also looked into the history of missions quite a bit, and even took a course out in Pasadena on that, and just to see how God has worked in carrying out His plan that He really states to Abraham.
To bless all the families, all the nations.
How He's worked through that, through the Old Testament and the New Testament, and then through church history. And how, in fact, even in the last century and this century, that really is being accomplished. And sometimes in North America, we don't see that, but Africa, south of the Sahara, for example, has become dominantly Christian in this century. And it's a remarkable revolution that's going on right now worldwide.
Appreciate your pointing that out. Finally, what do you find giving you courage as a Christian in what is dominantly a secular environment? You know, university campuses around the country are not exactly known as cocoons that are, encouraging people toward a Christian faith necessarily. But what do you find giving you courage to stand and to be for your presence in that environment as a Christian professor?
Well, I would say, really knowing God in a mature way, then you know who you are and whose you are.
Whose you are, I like that.
And if you have uncertainty in your faith, then it's rough. But if you really know who you are and whose you are and what your role is to be, my role is not just to be a geologist here. And as I told you earlier, the Lord really showed me that He wanted me to be a witness.
Thank you so much for your time. Enjoyed having you.
Great time.
Appreciate it very much.
Yeah.